The New York Times broke a story regarding a woman by the name of Renate Schroeder. She actually went to high school with Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, and she also happened to be one of the women who signed a letter vouching for Kavanaugh and his character. So she's been very supportive of him until she found out what Kavanaugh was referencing in his personal page in the high school yearbook. So the word Renate appears at least 14 times in Georgetown Preparatory School's 1983 yearbook, on individuals' pages, and in a group photo of 9 football players, including Judge Kavanaugh, who were described as Renate Alumni. It is a reference to Renate Schroeder, again, the woman who had supported Kavanaugh in that letter, who was also then a student at a nearby Catholic girls' school. So mentions of Renate were part of the football players' unsubstantiated boasting about their conquests. So anyone who used that label in the yearbook was essentially signaling to everyone that they had essentially slept with her.
Or at least hooked up with her in some way.
Yeah.
With her.
So one student from the school who's familiar with all this says, "I can't express how disgusted I am with them then and now." That's Sean Hagan. He's a former Georgetown Prep student. Also, it was reported that Kavanaugh's personal page, in addition to the Renate reference, talks about the drinking, 100 kegs or bust. And I'm only bringing, look, I don't care about the drinking. The only reason why I'm bringing that up is because it is relevant given the interview he just gave to Fox News, where he said, that he was this good boy who just went to Sunday church every Sunday and who just focused on his studies and worked really hard. And he made it seem as though some of the other students might have had one too many beers, but he didn't take responsibility for his own drinking. Okay, so there's that. Also, Renate Schroeder Dolphin joined those 64 women who said that they knew Judge Kavanaugh during their high school years, and they signed a letter to the leaders of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And here's a direct quote from Renate Schroeder Dolphin herself. She says, "I learned about these yearbook pages only a few days ago. I don't know what Renate Alumnus actually means. I can't begin to comprehend what goes through the minds of 17-year-old boys who write such things, but the insinuation is horrible, hurtful, and simply untrue. I pray their daughters are never treated this way. I will have no further comment." So she left it at that. But I mean, it gives you a sense of the way that they spoke about and treated women at the time.
So let me give the one and only caveat before I rip into him, that it does not necessarily mean that he did the sexual assault on Dr. Blasey. Now, what does it mean? It means he was a terrible guy back then. So no story has affected me as much as this one. Now, it's kind of a weird thing to say given that the gravity of the other stories are so much worse. But on those stories, we have said throughout, look, there's a fair debate as to the recollections from 35, 36 years ago, and especially with the Ramirez allegation where she wasn't sure, et cetera, right? And so if it's true, they're much worse. But some degree of questions remained about that. This is super clear and gives you an insight into the kind of people that they were. And so they had a PR guy, Jim McCarthy, issue a statement saying the Renate references were, quote, intended to allude to innocent dates or dance partners. No, it wasn't. I was in high school. We all were. You don't say you're a Renate alumni because you wanted to say, oh my God, I had a crush on her. Mm-hmm. That's not what football players who are known for doing 100 kegs or bust say, okay? That's, in fact, there's another great quote here if I can find it.
I have that quote. So, and it's a former student who knows Kavanaugh well. His name is William Fishburne, and he says, those guys weren't big on crushes. I think they felt that if a girl didn't want to date them, then they must be gay, meaning the women or the girls. I'm serious.
So I knew those kind of guys, and they're the worst. So they would, look, they're terrible in 2 different directions. One, you hook up with a girl, and I get it, you want to brag to your buddies. Everybody understand that, it's not the right thing. You're gonna put it into a yearbook, and you're gonna say that 14 of us hooked up with her, knowing that that might get back to her. God damn it, don't you have any conscience? And And then apparently a lot of them, of course, did not hook up with her. In fact, in this case, this woman says, I never even kissed him. I don't know where he got that from. So apparently he wanted to go along with the guys and he wanted to pretend that he was a tough guy. So he writes he's a Renate alumni. He didn't even do anything with her. Like, why are you shaming women who had the bad judgment to hook up with you in the first place?
Yeah.
Right? That drives me nuts. And then to even make up one because you're so pathetic, you couldn't hook up, but you wanted to shame a woman that you couldn't hook up with anyway? God damn it, man, that pissed me off. It's always pissed me off.
Right, and it's, by the way, this is not, as many women who are watching this right now, they know that this is not an isolated case, this is not unique. Any woman has gone through an experience where if they sleep with someone and that person ends up being a bad guy, he'll go around and paint you as a whore or whatever it is. And then if you refuse to sleep with that person, they'll also slander you as either a prude or just make up that they did sleep with you when you really didn't. That's a common thing. And I want to reiterate, and it is important, this doesn't mean that he is guilty of any wrongdoing, right? This doesn't confirm any of the accusations, but I do think that it paints a picture of who he really was, because his public image, or at least the public image that he's putting out there right now, does conflict considerably with some of the evidence that's out there. And one other thing I want to bring up, look, the FBI allegedly did 6 comprehensive background checks into Kavanaugh. I mean, that's at least what the Senate Republicans and Trump himself have said over and over again. There's already been an investigation. They've already looked into their background. They didn't find anything. Why didn't they find this? I know that I would be curious if I saw that reference. Like, what does that mean?
Well, look, this is not a, look, I want to be clear. If this was just by itself, nobody's not getting confirmed as Supreme Court justice because they were a jerk in high school and they wrote terribly mean things in their yearbook. But within the context of these stories, what we're trying to figure out is who's right, who's wrong, and one of the things I constantly question throughout all of this, and you see me doing it on air, is can a 17-year-old be, is that the same guy as a 53-year-old that he is today?
No, it's not.
Okay, no, and I know it's not,
Yeah.
and of course, many people change, almost everybody changes in different degrees. So I'm sure he wouldn't do this as a judge, I hope. On the other hand, some of his positions shame women on a national level, on a macro level. But a guy who does this was never a decent guy. And so could he become decent later? I guess. But I know I would have known that guy in high school and hated him. And so, those guys, every one of those guys. And before, the jury wasn't in on his character, at least back then.
Right.
Now the jury's at least definitely in on his character back then, which is he was a total and utter jerk who didn't mind humiliating and embarrassing people so that his bros could think that a little more highly of him, and he can get a notch in his belt for the accomplishment of humiliating other women.
Right. I just want to quickly disagree with you slightly, because I do think there are certain things, like everyone grows. I don't think that who you were in high school is indicative of who you are now, but there are exceptions. And so the exception that I make is if he is found, guilty, if there's some way of proving that he did attempt to rape someone, that goes beyond, character for me, right? Because I think if you were willing to do that at any point in your life, that says something about you,
Yeah.
right? And we were all, immature, juvenile, whatever, when we were in high school, and we all mature, we all grow up. So I don't want to necessarily hold this whole yearbook thing against him, but I think it's important to bring it up because, again, it conflicts with the image that he's trying to put out there at the moment.
No, and I don't want anybody to get what I'm saying wrong. The jury's out on whether someone can change that dramatically, and I know I've changed a lot in my life, so I wouldn't want to prejudge people on that. What I'm saying, as I just said a couple of seconds ago, is the jury's in on who he was back then. Mm-hmm. And look, I'm sure I did a lot of things when I was younger that was jerkish, but this deeply humiliating someone, I mean, I hope to God that's not in my character. And there's a kind of person, like,
You're the kind of guy, like you've told stories about this in post-game shows. Like you were the kind of guy who would literally get into physical fights with students that would pick on the powerless.
Yeah, but I like to fight, etc. But look, but this at least tells you he doesn't mind hurting the feelings of someone else very significantly. It's not an issue for him back then. So if you take that as some evidence of other ways that he might want to hurt, doesn't mind hurting other people's feelings or doesn't care about other people's feelings, it's some evidence of that. But to me, at least, overwhelmingly, it's evidence of his character back then. And it ain't good. And it's certainly not the choir boy picture he's trying to paint on Fox News. Like what you see? Click the subscribe button below and don't forget to ring the bell to never miss another video from the Young Turks.